Kirtan first. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shanyavadi Vastatyarishatarine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shanyavadi Vastatyarishatarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Gora Hari Bol Gora Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Gora Hari Bol Shri Shankar Gaura Hari Ki Jai Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai So, good evening, Hare Krishna to everyone. Thank you again so much for joining us. We're going to continue with our discussion on the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. This is a wonderful book by Srila Prabhupada based on the biography of Lord Chaitanya called Chaitanya Charitamrita, written by Krishnadas Kaviraj. So we will begin with the prayers. Om Jnanatmirandasya Gnananjana Chakshurunditam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Vinodishtam Saptam Yen Bhutale Bhaktiram Mahyam Tadasvaptantikam Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaunavani Pacharine Sheshakti Mani Pachakti. So we are concluding Lord Chaitanya's teachings to Sanatana Goswami. These teachings began in the third chapter of this book, The Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and it has been a wonderful journey from the very basics of spiritual life all the way to prema, which is the highest goal of devotional service. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took us through that last week, and this week we're going to conclude the teachings with a summary of basically what Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has taught us so far, as well as very important points for us to bear in mind in these perfectional stages, and also about common misconceptions that can come up about Krishna, points that we should know, especially in our preaching. So we'll chant the invocation. Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhaktivinoda Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhaktivinoda Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhaktivinoda. The translation is: Glory to Shri Chaitanya and Nityananda, glory to Advaita Chandra, and glory to all the devotees of Shri Gaura or Chaitanya. So as we were saying, we had been discussing last week that prema is the highest stage, and that at this stage, the devotee is able to experience most extraordinary emotions that can manifest in the external body as symptoms of ecstasy, which are sometimes imitated by those who are not advanced in devotional service, but who want to profit in some way from it. So the Lord is guiding us here about how we can recognize the truly elevated devotees who will generally, obviously, their powers hide those ecstatic so as not to encourage those who are miscreants and who will abuse the imitation of such devotees. So the Lord says, persons who have been thoroughly cleansed by devotional service and are always joyful, being situated in elevated consciousness, who are very much attached to studying Srimad Bhagavatam, who are always cheerful in the association of devotees, who have accepted the lotus feet of Krishna as the ultimate shelter of their lives, and who are pleased to perform all details of devotional service. Such devotees have in their pure hearts the transcendental ecstasy of attachment, which has been developed through old and new reformatory practice. So basically, we can see things that we may sometimes take as ordinary. Devotees who are joyful and who are engaging in any kind of services that are not even considered high services that we might have the misunderstanding of. Those who are studying Srimad Bhagavatam very quietly and patiently themselves. Those who are happy in the association of devotees, surrendered to Krishna, not necessarily occupying important positions, and so on. Those persons have in their hearts, the Lord says, this ecstasy of attachment, that is prema. And that has been developed through old and new reformatory practice. So basically, we said that the process of devotional service, starting from Shraddha and moving steadily through all the stages, is a way for us to progressively uncover our relationship to Krishna and our love for Krishna. And somebody who hasn't had such a history and who just suddenly starts displaying ecstatic symptoms, this is not someone who has genuinely come to this position. So the Lord is saying that those who have, though, faithfully performed this and who are acting in this way in these what seems like basic but which are essential activities of devotional service, these are the people that we can believe are actually at the level of prema, even without displaying all the ecstatic symptoms. That ecstatic state of being enriched with love of Krishna and transcendental experience gradually develops into the mature bliss of spiritual life. Tasting such spiritual bliss is not possible for those who are not situated in Krishna consciousness and devotional service. This fact is further corroborated in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 2.5.131, where it is said, "It is very difficult for the non-devotee to understand the taste of devotional service. Only one who has completely taken shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna and whose life is merged in the ocean of devotional service can understand this transcendental pleasure." So for somebody looking out at devotional service without actually being involved in it, and particularly under the guidance of the right authorities that can guide us into how we can get into devotional service, they're not going to be able to understand the bliss that such a person will get from it. It's like an example we can take in the material world that anyone can perhaps do the exercises that, say, a physiotherapist, occupational therapist can show one by just looking at videos on the internet. But what these therapists actually do is they can tailor that exercise particularly to you. And when they find that doing an exercise on their own might not actually be favorable, it might actually be bad for one because one is not aware of their body type, perhaps in particular, or what the implications of that exercise will be. So you need a trained person to guide you in it so that you get the maximum benefit. So in the same way, spiritual life is not something that you can just pick up from a book and this is the point that we're going to get to, and we can just experience the ecstasies like that. It must be guided properly and performed diligently and sincerely, and this is the way to get to the platform of ecstasy. Now, what we were saying about how these symptoms can't be just displayed, and rather there are other symptoms. Srila Prabhupada makes a very nice point in Srimad Bhagavatam, the purport of Canto 2, Chapter 324, that when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu met Ramananda Rai in the banks of the Godavari, this is a wonderful episode that we're going to come to as well, teachings of Lord Chaitanya in a few chapters. He also experienced ecstatic symptoms on meeting Ramananda Rai because both are eternal associates of each other. But it says that in the presence of some non-devotee brahmanas who were attendants of the Rai, the Lord suppressed these symptoms. So sometimes they are not visible even in the body of the first-class devotee for certain circumstantial reasons, what we've been saying. Therefore, real steady bhava is definitely displayed in the matter of cessation of material desires, called shanti. That's starting with a K-ish. So it's slightly different from the word shanti, which means peace. So it means that a devotee, a pure devotee, somebody who's on the level of bhava and prema, is not going to have material desires. Utilization of every moment in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. They're not going to occasionally be watching a movie or watching the sport. These are persons who are spending every moment in the service of the Lord, and not in the service of the Lord for any ulterior motive, but purely for the pleasure of the Lord. This is called avyartha kalakam. Eagerness for glorifying the Lord constantly. Nama Gani Sadaruchi. Always praising the Lord, not themselves, not any other person in a materialistic way, or again for any gain. Attraction for living in the land of the Lord. Priti Stad Vasati Stade. So whether it's a temple or their home that they have converted into a spiritual place for the shelter, for the worship of the Lord, or the actual holy dance, they're always going to be aspiring for living where the Lord is constantly praised and worshipped, and not for any benefit of their own. Complete detachment from material happiness, virakti. So we again understand from this that they're not looking for pleasure in any other source. They're only looking for trying to please Krishna. And pridelessness, mana shunyata. So they're not looking for positions, they're not trying to advance themselves through their devotional service, they're not trying to advance themselves materially. So somebody who is actually situated in this way, whether they are experiencing ecstatic symptoms or not, these are the devotees who are in this situation of bhava. One who has developed all these transcendental qualities is really possessed of the bhava stage, as distinguished from the stone-hearted imitator or mundane devotee. This is very, very important for us to understand who truly elevated devotees are. These qualities are what we should be looking for. And a bit further on, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is going to describe more qualities based on what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Lord Chaitanya thus briefly explained the transcendental situation, the spiritual relish of life, which he called the fifth stage of perfection. The first stage of perfection is to become a religious man in the ordinary sense, as known in the material world. The second stage of perfection is to become materially rich. The third stage of perfection is the attainment of complete sense enjoyment. And the fourth stage of perfection is liberation. But above liberation are those in the fifth stage of perfection, those who are established in Krishna consciousness or devotional service to the Lord. Already liberated, devotees who reach the highest perfection of devotional service to Krishna consciousness experience the taste of the ecstasy of spiritual relish. So these perfections, these four perfections that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is speaking of, we know as the Purusharthas, or the four aims of life according to Vedic culture. And these are Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. So dharma is the religious principles, artha is economic development, kama is the energy, complete sense gratification, sense pleasures, and moksha is liberation. Ultimately, it's generally taken that out of these four, liberation is the highest aim, and the other three are actually guiding the human being towards that highest aim. So the foundation is the religious principles or dharma, and if one has this foundation laid very well, then one can develop the artha and the kama according to these religious principles. So artha is economic development, and this economic development is done, of course, according to religious principles. It's just for one to keep body and soul together, so that one doesn't go off madly in the pursuit of material opulences. That's a correct artha. And kama, sense pleasures, are actually pleasures that are regulated by religious principles. So eating that's regulated, relationships between men and women that is regulated in married life. There are sense pleasures like art and drama and culture and so on, music that are regulated again by religious principles. So in this way, a human being is able to attain to liberation by living such a life. And that is, of course, in the ideal sense. The problem in this day and age is that all these aims have been channeled towards sense gratification. Even religious principles are manipulated for sense gratification, which Prabhupada mentions many times. But even above these four, even if they're being practiced in a proper sense, above all of them, even above liberation, is the aim of pleasing Krishna. This is what devotees are aiming for in devotional service. Because they're able to attain to this transcendental state, nothing else actually matters, because they're experiencing a happiness that is far beyond what these four aims of Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha can even give them. They're far beyond even the happiness of liberation. Somebody who attains to ordinary liberation, who's free from all the material cares and wants, is certainly experiencing a kind of bliss. But the devotee, somebody who has experienced prema now by pleasing the Supreme Lord, they are in a higher, even higher state of bliss. This is what Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu calls the fifth perfection. The Lord then told Sanatana Goswami that he had previously taught his younger brother, Rupa Goswami, at Prayag, Allahabad. The Lord assured Sanatana Goswami that he had empowered Rupa Goswami to spread the knowledge he had given him. The Lord then similarly ordered Sanatana Goswami to write books on the transcendental loving service of Lord Krishna, and he authorized him to excavate the different sites of Krishna's pastimes in the district of Mathura. Sanatana Goswami was also advised to construct temples in Vrindavan and to write books on the principles of Vaishnavism as authorized by Lord Chaitanya himself. Sanatana Goswami executed all these desires of the Lord. He constructed the temple of Madan Mohan at Vrindavan, and he wrote books on the principles of devotional service such as the Hari Bhakti Vilas. So in order for us to progress through these perfections, to attain these perfections, we need the guidance and the authority of a spiritual master. So this is also a very significant point that will keep coming up in our class today. And we can see how important that is from the example of Sanatana Goswami. He was a completely renounced person. He had given away his last possession in order to get the teachings of the Lord, because he had to demonstrate his complete renunciation. And now the Lord was giving him all these instructions. It was very difficult to even procure paper in the time that he was being guided to write books, what to speak of excavating holy places and establishing temples. Very, very costly method. But he didn't protest, and neither did his brother Rupa Goswami. Instead, we're seeing the point here that they both were empowered by the Lord. So all the Goswamis went to Vrindavan, and even though they were mendicants living under trees every night, they didn't have a shortage of paper. These were being provided by the rulers, His Holiness Indranand Swami Maharaj, giving us the history of how they were able to do this. And also they were able to excavate the holy places guided by the Lord. They were discovering these by his arrangement, and then to establish temples. The help was just coming. We know the history of Madan Mohan. When Sanatana Goswami desired that his Lord would have a temple, there was the incident of the merchant whose ship ran aground in the Yamuna, and he provided um, the expenses for the temple because his ship was saved after he prayed to the Lord. And also Rupa Goswami for his Govindaji, he didn't even actually desire a temple at that time, but by the arrangement of the Lord, King Mansingh made the arrangements for this temple to be built, and Rupa Goswami accepted it as the will. So we can see that when the spiritual master inspires one and gives one an instruction, then the ability to fulfill that instruction comes with the instruction. And Srila Prabhupada's disciples also experienced this, and many of us, the third generation, second and third generation, are also experiencing this phenomenon. The power comes from the mercy of the spiritual master, who is the external manifestation of the Lord himself. Lord Chaitanya further taught Sanatana Goswami how one can live in the material world while being in a complete relationship with Krishna. And he also taught him that there is no necessity for dry renunciation. The purport of these instructions is that in the present age, there are many persons who accept the renounced order of life, sannyas, but who are not spiritually advanced. Lord Chaitanya did not approve of such sannyas, explaining that it is wrong to accept sannyas without having perfect knowledge of Krishna consciousness. Actually, we find that there are many so-called sannyasis whose actions are below those of ordinary men, but who pass themselves off as being in the renounced order of life. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did not accept such hypocrisy, and he instructed Sanatana Goswami to elaborate on the subject in his different books. So there was a thinking, and it still probably prevails in many people, that to make advancement in spiritual life, to attain the perfections of spiritual life, to attain prema even, one needs to be renounced, and that means renounced in the sense of accepting a renounced order of life, Babaji ashram or sannyas ashram. And the problem is that whereas this was more easy to do in previous ages, in Kali Yuga it's exceptionally difficult. And so Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, understanding this, he is empowering Sanatana Goswami and all the Goswamis basically to give us a system of bhakti that is possible for those who are in renounced orders of life, those who are actually in any order of life and any condition of life to execute in order to become renounced, to become so fully renounced that one can achieve the perfection of devotional service, to attain prema, even in this life while staying in those conditions, but by prosecuting these principles very easily. So this is very, very special and very wonderful mercy has been given by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and these are in these precious books of the Goswamis, how we can actually liberate ourselves, whatever condition of life we're in. Srila Prabhupada has given us all these wonderful literatures so that we can do just that, even in the age of Kali. The perfectional stage of life, which one can experience even while being in the material world, is described by Lord Krishna in the 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So this perfectional stage, which we spoke about in the beginning, how a devotee practically lives his life in prema, this is now elaborated on by Lord Chaitanya, based on what Lord Krishna has said in the 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. These are very nice and very important meditations for us in order to understand what it's like to actually be somebody in prema, somebody dear to Krishna, somebody who's attained perfection of life. There it is said that one who is not envious of any living entity, who is friendly, merciful, and detached from material possessions, who is situated in his pure identity without any false conception of the body as the self, who is equipoised in both happiness and distress, who is forgiving, always satisfied, always engaged in devotional service, and always surrendered unto the Supreme Lord with his body and mind. Such a devotee is very dear to Krishna. A devotee who never gives trouble to any living entity, either by his body or his mind, who is never affected by material distress and happiness, and who is never angry or pleased with anything material, is very dear to the Supreme Lord. He who is never dependent on anyone in this world, who is completely surrendered to the Supreme Lord, who is purified, expert, neutral, free of pain, and aloof from any material endeavor which requires too much attention. Such a devotee is also very dear to Lord Krishna. A person who is never subjected to material happiness or hatred, lamentation or ambition, who is aloof from all materially auspicious and inauspicious activities, and who is fully devoted in Krishna consciousness, such a devotee is very dear to Lord Krishna. A devotee who treats equally a so-called enemy and a so-called friend in the material world, who is not disturbed by heat or cold, who is without attachment, who is equally situated when respected or insulted, who is always grave, satisfied in any condition of life, without any fixed residence, and fixed in Krishna consciousness. Such a devotee is very dear to Lord Krishna. Even if one is not situated in the transcendental position, still, if he approves the transcendental life described here, he also becomes very dear to Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada is saying that even if we are not in the renounced order of life, but if we are following all the principles that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given to Rupa Goswami, to Nath Goswami, to other devotees that have been in their books, if we're following these principles to achieve these qualities, these transcendental qualities that are here, we can still be situated in the transcendental perfection of Prema. This is the great mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so we can, these verses, verses 13 to 20 from the 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, these should be our constant meditation as we're engaging in all the processes of devotional service, particularly as we've been discussing in the last few weeks, attentive chanting, hearing of the Srimad Bhagavatam and other discussions of Krishna, soul sazing with devotees, serving devotees, and praying for mercy. Because above all, we need the mercy of the Lord and His devotees in order to make all our efforts perfect. This will definitely bring us to that level of perfection, of prema, of all these qualities of being dear to Krishna. And this is the highest perfection that one can ever aspire to achieve. In Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 2, Text 5, there is a very nice verse stating that a devotee should always remain dependent on the mercy of the Supreme Lord, and that as far as his material necessities are concerned, he should be satisfied with whatever is obtained without endeavor. In this regard, Shukadev Goswami advised that a devotee should never approach a materialistic person for any kind of help. As far as one's bodily necessities are concerned, one can pick up torn clothing from the street, take fruits offered by trees, drink water from flowing rivers, and live in a mountain cave constructed by nature herself. Even if one is unable to do all these things, he should nonetheless completely depend on the Supreme Lord, understanding that since the Lord provides everyone with food and shelter, he will never fail to care for his devotees who are fully surrendered unto him. In any case, the devotee is always protected, and therefore he should not at all be anxious for his maintenance. So another very important quality of the pure devotee in prema who has achieved the perfectional stage is complete surrender to the Lord. And this means that one doesn't depend on anyone else for anything. Even if one needs more than just the absolute basics, which Shukadev Goswami is explaining here, he's making a good point that whatever we need just to keep the body and soul together, just in order to live comfortably and peacefully and execute devotional service to our cares, this is what we should be happy with, whatever the Lord provides us, and not keep aspiring to any more. When we keep trying harder and harder for material possessions or material things over and above what the Lord has given us, the basics to keep the body and soul together, as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has advised us previously, then we're spending a lot of time and energy that we could be using in devotional service, and we're also experiencing higher levels of anxiety to try and get these things. So repeatedly, we are advised to keep our lives as simple as possible so that we could spend all that energy actually in our Krishna consciousness. And this is also bringing us to surrender, because we leave everything at the Lord's feet. Whatever He gives us, we're happy with. We utilize it in His service. Whatever He takes away, we accept that we don't need. And we get closer to depending on Him fully, and not people around us, not the people we work for, not the people providing us security. And that way, our dependence can increase until we've reached that complete total surrender to Krishna. This is very important for us in this perfectional stage. Then in the next paragraph, Lord Chaitanya is explaining how even the demigods have not really actually reached this stage. They don't actually have much of an understanding unless they've been guided by authorities as great as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or others who are in particularly the understandings and rasas of Vrindavan Dham, exactly what Vrindavan Dham is like. And he gives the example from the Shastra, the Harivamsha, about Indra. And we know that Indra was particularly confused about Krishna stopping his sacrifice in the Srimad Bhagavatam because he couldn't understand who Krishna and who his associates Vrindavan actually were. He took them to be ordinary village people, and so he unleashed the torrents of rain. And it was only after Krishna had significantly humbled him that he understood not just the superiority of Krishna as his supreme lord, but also the importance of the inhabitants of Vrindavan. So basically, his knowledge of Goloka is very limited, and this is what he is apologizing for. Telling Krishna that you have descended from that Goloka planet in the spiritual world, and the disturbance that I created was all due to my foolishness. Because he says that he couldn't understand the situation of Goloka, and even Brahma, who is, of course, the authority among the demigods, he couldn't even guide him on that. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is explaining that even though the demigods are situated much higher than the human beings, still there's many planetary systems even in the material world above them, and even the highest planet in the material world, Brahma Loka, is still within the material world, Devi Dham. Above that, maybe Shiva Dham, but way above that even is Vaikuntha. And then even beyond Vaikuntha is Goloka. And if it's difficult for even the inhabitants of Vaikuntha to understand and reach Goloka, can we imagine how much more difficult it is um, for us and the demigods in between, who actually don't always have the access to the information that even we have? So this is how important it is that we're getting this opportunity of this perfection and that we make the most of it. The last phase of the pastimes of Lord Krishna is described in Srimad Bhagavatam as Noshala Leela. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is clearing up some misconceptions here. This series of pastimes includes Krishna's mysterious disappearance from the material world. In that pastime, the Lord played the part of being killed by a hunter. There are many improper explanations of scriptural passages describing the last portion of Krishna's pastime, such as the explanation of descriptions of Krishna as the incarnation of a hare, but Lord Chaitanya properly explained these passages and gave them the right interpretation. As far as Krishna being the incarnation of a hare is concerned, this is mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam, the Vishnu Purana, and the Mahabharata. In the Mahabharata, it is stated that Lord Vishnu snatched the grey hair and a black hair from his head, and that these two hairs entered into the wombs of two queens of the Yadu dynasty, namely Rohini and Devaki. It is also stated there that Lord Krishna descends into the material world in order to vanquish all the demons. Some say that Krishna is the incarnation of Vishnu who lies in the ocean of milk within this universe. Srila Rupa Goswami in his Laghu Bhagavatamrita, along with his commentator Sri Baladev Vidyabhushan, have discussed these points fully and have established the exact truth. Sri Jiva Goswami also discusses these points in the Krishna Sandarbha. So Sri Prabhupada has been so merciful to us that he has clarified all of these as well for us to understand. The point of the Lord being shot by the hunter is actually one of the most misunderstood portions of his pastimes, because people, of course, take this to mean that he was an ordinary person. And Sri Prabhupada has pointed out many times that Krishna was involved in so many battles with the most extraordinarily powerful demons, with the most extraordinarily powerful demigods like Lord Shiva, with the Battle of Kurukshetra, where his extraordinarily powerful devotees like Bhishmadeva fighting. Krishna was able to not just escape all of these, but was actually completely unscathed. And then a simple hunter would be able to injure him a little bit on his foot with an arrow, and then he would apparently die. So this is very, very unbelievable. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur even says that this arrow didn't actually even touch, didn't significantly injure Krishna's foot. It just basically seemed like it just touched it and bounced off. So this is not at all any injury that would kill the Supreme Personality of Godhead, not again. after these extraordinary feats. And in this regard, Shukadev Goswami reassures Maharaj Parikshit when he is explaining these pastimes. This is in Canto 11, Chapter 31, Text 12 of Srimad Bhagavatam. Lord Krishna brought the son of his guru back from the planet of the Lord of Death in the boy's self-same body. And as the ultimate giver of protection, he saved you also when you were burned by the Brahmastra of Ashwatthama. He conquered in battle even Lord Shiva, who deals death to the agents of death. And he sent the hunter Jara directly to Vaikuntha in his human body. How could such a personality be unable to protect his own self? But Krishna, who has conquered death for others, would be subject to death. So we can see how completely ludicrous these explanations are. But we understand that the Lord was winding up his pastimes in his own mystical way, and he was also concluding a lot of things that needed to be sorted out, like the curse from the Yadu dynasty, and that of course included himself. But he is never actually directly affected by these things. Whereas it appeared that the others were killed, he was not killed. He ascended in his own spiritual form by his own divine will. So devotees are fortunate to have the teachings of the acharyas to clarify all these points so that we don't get misled. And we can think at least that the fools who will consider that Krishna was killed, they have something to chew on for many lifetimes. At least in some way, maybe they're meditating on the Lord by arguing for his death, but we know the truth. And now about the verses that say that Krishna and Balaram came from the black and white hair of Lord Vishnu. This is also a bit hard to understand because the Lord never ages. So how he would actually have a white hair or a gray hair to actually pull out to become Lord Balaram is a bit of a strange one. And secondly, the misunderstanding is actually from the Sanskrit of the verses. Srila Prabhupada's translation of the Srimad Bhagavatam verse that is questioned here, which is in Canto 2, Chapter 7, Text 26, he says that the words Sita Krishna Keshaha, this has been wrongly translated. The Pita, meaning white to those who translate the point wrongly, Krishna meaning dark, and Keshaha meaning hairs. Prabhupada translates as the beautiful Sita, Krishna, dark, Kesha, hair of Krishna, because the verse is about Krishna's descent. So if we read that verse, we'll understand how much more sense it makes. And thanks to Srila Prabhupada, we don't have any misunderstandings in our reading of that verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. As far as the verses from the Vishnu Purana and the Mahabharata, which say similar things, Srila Jiva Goswami and Srila Sridhar Swami also clear this one up by saying that the words there called Keshash are not here as well, but actually refers to Krishna and Balaram as the splendors. And so in that way, it also explains how they descend into this material world, splendid beings, and not necessarily as an incarnation of anyone else. We've been discussing much evidence in the last few months as we've been discussing the teachings of Lord Chaitanya as to why Krishna and Balaram are actually not incarnations of any of the other forms of the Lord, not of Narayan and not of Vishnu. And on top of all of these explanations and evidences, we have the Paribhas Sutra of Srimad Bhagavatam, Ete Chamstra, Kalaha Puntaha, Krishnastu Bhagavan Sayam, Indrari Vyakulam Lokam, Hridayanti Yuge Yuge, which clearly states that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the source of all other explanations and incarnations. So these evidences are enough to clarify that the Lord is not an incarnation of Lord Vishnu or Lord Narayan. And also when we discussed the last point of that paragraph about how the Lord descends to kill demons, this is not a task that's given to him like how Lord Shiva has the task of being the destroyer, Brahma has the task of being creator. Krishna is not under obligation to perform anything, for his energies can do everything for him. And if he wanted to kill the demons, he could have his energies do that. He's had his energies actually do that in many other instances. So when Krishna comes, his confidential reasons, Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas explain are actually to display his wonderful pastimes, to enjoy and relish those pastimes with his devotees, to deliver his devotees, and to show the rest of us who are struggling in this material world what the spiritual world is like, what it's like to associate with Krishna, what it's like to experience these pastimes with him. This is actually a way of him teaching to us to come back to him. This is the actual reason why he descends to the material world. When Lord Chaitanya finished his teachings to Sri Sanatana Goswami, Sanatana, being empowered and enlightened, was so transcendently pleased that he at once fell at the feet of Lord Chaitanya and said, I was born in a very low family and I have always associated with lowly people. Therefore, I am the lowest of sinners. Yet you are so kind that you have taught me lessons which are not even understood by Lord Brahma, the greatest being in this universe. By your grace, I have appreciated the conclusions which you have taught me, but I am so low that I cannot even touch a drop of the ocean of your instruction. Thus, if you want me, who am nothing but a layman, to dance, then please give me your benediction by placing your feet on my head. So Sanatana Goswami has repeatedly um, mentioned disqualifications which we know he actually didn't have out of his great humility, which is again demonstrating that one who is truly advanced, truly at the level of Prema or even higher, such persons are never proud, never arrogant. They're so humble that they'll take positions that they're not even in, because we know that Sanatana Goswami actually came even from a good family. But this is the level of humility that he's displaying. It is truly the ornament of a devotee, and it really endears one to the spiritual master and to the Lord. And a very important point that he's making here is that Brahma, who is even, we spoke earlier on that Indra was saying that even Brahma couldn't guide him about the glories of Goloka Vrindavan. He's actually the head of our Sampradaya. He received knowledge from Krishna himself, and he was able to enlighten his most foremost disciple, Narada Muni, and this knowledge was passed on very faithfully from Guru to disciple. So what is Sanatana meaning here? So Krishna gave this transcendental knowledge to Brahma, and uh, and he of course passed it on to all his disciples up to Madhavendra Puri. But at this point, Madhavendra Puri, who is the spiritual master of Lord Chaitanya's spiritual master, he was experiencing Mahabhav. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is giving us knowledge even more than what Krishna had given, because he's giving us the knowledge that Radharani has. This Mahabhav and how to achieve love of Godhead in these rasas that had not actually been granted or explained before Madhavendra Puri. So particularly Madhura Ras, also Vatsalya Ras, and Sakya Ras. So the rasas of conjugal love and Vatsalya, parental love and love and friendship. So all of this had not been given up to that point. And so Sri Prabhupada has said it many times that even the demigods are trying to take birth on the earth so that they can get this love and to get everything explained so wonderfully and so easily through the line of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, so that they can achieve this very quickly and efficiently. So again, this is the extraordinary mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So thus Sanatana Goswami prayed for the Lord's confirmation that his teachings would actually evolve in his heart by his grace. Thus Sanatana knew that there was no possibility of his being able to describe the Lord's teachings. Otherwise, Sanatana Goswami knew that there was no possibility of his being able to describe the Lord's teachings, that is, without the blessings of the Lord. The purport of this is that the acharyas, or spiritual masters, are authorized by higher authorities. Instruction alone cannot make one an expert. Unless one is blessed by the spiritual master or acharya, such teaching cannot become fully manifest. Therefore, one should seek the mercy of the spiritual master so that his instructions can develop within oneself. After receiving the prayers of Sanatana Goswami, Lord Chaitanya placed his feet on Sanatana's head and gave him the benediction that the Lord's instructions would fully develop in him. So Sanatana Goswami here is not praying to the Lord as the Lord, but he's praying to him as the spiritual master. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the spiritual master. The Lord has a duty to be impartial, we could say. He's a seed-giving father of all, and there are many detractors, of course, especially among the demons, who want to accuse him of partiality to his devotees. But the spiritual master is the Lord's mercy incarnation, who doesn't have to be impartial, and he can show the full mercy of the Lord on the devotee. We have to take advantage of that opportunity by serving the spiritual master submissively and inquiring from him, getting transcendental knowledge like Sanatana Goswami did. Because not only does the knowledge come from the spiritual master, but through his mercy we have the ability to use and apply that knowledge. Sanatana Goswami is so highly elevated and so qualified materially and spiritually, and now he's been enlightened completely in the science of devotion served by Lord Chaitanya, but still he's praying for mercy and still he's praying for blessing, so that he can properly utilize this knowledge. And this is so very important, because it is just as easy as reading a book, like Srila Prabhupada said. Why would anyone accept the spiritual master? Well, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had Mahabhav. Why did he accept the spiritual master? In order to have Mahabhav activated, as we could say. Why are the demigods just not getting copies of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings, Sri Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami? Why are they coming to take birth in Krishna consciousness here? Why do all the acharyas, even though they're all elevated souls except spiritual masters? The answer is given in this very important verse in the Shvetashvara Upanishad, very famous verse. Yasyadeva para bhaktir yasyadeva guru yasyate kavita yataha prakashante mahatmanaha. Only unto those great souls who have implicit faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master, all the imports of Vedic knowledge automatically revealed. His Holiness Gaura Premi D.D said that when Srila Prabhupada was asked what was the most important verse in all of the scriptures, he said that it is this verse. So we should all make note of this. This is how important it is to get the mercy of the spiritual master. Thus the Lord described the ultimate stage of love of Godhead. Lord Chaitanya said that such a description cannot be given very elaborately, but that he had informed Sanatana as far as possible. The author of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita concludes this chapter by writing that anyone who attentively hears these instructions of Lord Chaitanya to Sanatana Goswami very soon becomes situated in Krishna consciousness and engages in pure devotional service to the Lord. This has been the most extraordinary, wonderful journey, getting the instructions of the Lord, and we pray to also develop pure devotional service benediction given by Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami, who is the author of Chaitanya Charitamrita that Srila Prabhupada is mentioning. And I thank you all so much for your kind attention. Shri Shandai Gaura Hari Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. And are there any questions or comments or utilizations? Anything for clarification?
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji, for wonderful class. Dandava Pranam.
Hare Krishna, Ji, please.
Ask you, if Bhishma Dev was absorbed on the bed of arrows, was absorbed by Krishna in the form of Narayan, yes?
Sorry, Mataji, you said?
Bhishma Dev, when he was
Yeah.
dying, he was
Yes.
absorbed by Krishna in his form of Narayan, yes?
Because he is in that rasa of Dasya Ras.
Yes,
so
I
for
know
him, the form
what is
that he
the
loves is
significance of
yes,
four arms of Narayan?
because he's in that Dasya Ras. For him, the forearm form is the form that he loves the most. So it's like how when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was trying to preach to Murari Gupta, we know that Murari Gupta is Hanuman. So for him, even though Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was testing him repeatedly, trying to, we could say, convert him to loving Radha and Krishna more, Murari Gupta could do that because his rasa is the rasa of Hanuman, Dasya Ras, and in his heart it's Sita and Ram. And because of that, he actually could not give it up, and he was thinking of even giving up his life because he didn't want to disappoint Lord Chaitanya. And of course, the Lord told him that he didn't have to do that he was just testing him. So in the same way, Bhishma Dev had, we could say, the highest opportunity to see Krishna himself, who is the reservoir of all beauty and pleasure, we could say greatly even than Narayan, as we were discussing the 64 qualities of Krishna last week, and we were saying that his beauty is greater and his other opulences are greater. But still he desired to see the form of Narayan, because for him, that is what is in his heart. This is his intrinsic nature, we could say. And he couldn't give that nature up. So to please him, Krishna appeared as that four-armed form. And so he was able to focus on that form and give up his body. So this is not like a bad thing or a lower thing. This is just that everybody has their rasa that they're situated in. And in that rasa, they love the Lord in a particular way. And the Lord himself, he can appear like that to please that devotee. And where Bhishma Dev serves in the spiritual world, the Lord is present in that four-armed form.
Thank you,
Is that
Mataji.
okay, Mataji?
Yes, thank you very much. Very complete and wonderful.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Is there any other questions?
Haribo,
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
thank you for the class. If I may ask one,
Uh,
if I may ask one
Sure.
question.
Mhm.
I think you said also that when a person, when a devotee is engaged in devotional service, he's already liberated.
Yes.
At what level of advancement? Kanista, Madhyam, Uttama, or is one considered liberated?
Definitely would say not at Kanishta, because Srila Prabhupada has stated that many times that a Kanishta devotees, in a way we could say he said a material devotee, somebody who's still on the material plane and therefore seeing things in seeing devotional service in a materialistic light. Now, as far as certainly an Uttamadikari is liberated. As far as a Madhyamadikari, we know that pure devotees have to come down, even a devotee on the Uttam level sometimes has to come down to the level of the Madhyamadikari in order to spread Krishna consciousness. So even though they are liberated devotees, they may have to come down to a Madhyam level. So what do we mean by that? At an Uttam level, a pure devotee sees everybody as a devotee of Krishna. They don't make any distinction as to who is, inverted commas, not a devotee, who is a devotee. What that means is somebody who's actively engaged in devotional service, someone who isn't. Because on that elevated level, they see that everybody is, the spirit soul, and everybody is the Lord's servant. So for them, we would say, and they see themselves as, of course, the servant of everyone else. So in order to preach to others, it may be a little bit of a challenge, because they're not going to see anybody who actually needs to be preached to. So for such a pure devotee, they come to the level of Madhyam, because at the level of Madhyamadikari, you have the distinction of where you see Krishna as the Supreme Lord. You see those good devotees as as someone you should have a friendship with, or someone you can associate with. You see those who are ignorant of devotional principles as innocent, and you need to preach to them. And you see those who are envious, those who are frankly atheistic, demoniac, those who are very averse to the principles of devotional service. You see them as those who need to be avoided. We know that one of the ninth offense is to not preach to those who are envious, those who have no faith, those who are in this level of consciousness, because if you preach to them, they're going to cause offenses, and you don't want to make it even harder for them to make any progress. So in that way, it's important that you sort of avoid those people as much as possible. So without coming to that level, it's difficult to preach, because you need to make these distinctions. You need to reach out to the innocent. You need to have good relationships with the devotees and so on. So they could be even devotees who are at the level of Madhyam Adhikari, who are actually liberated souls. They're just acting at that level for preaching purposes or whatever other services, for example. And even if someone is just a, inverted commas, we could say just a pure Madhyam Adhikari who hasn't actually progressed with the Madhikari and come back to that level, we had discussed a couple of weeks ago that Srila Prabhupada says just by virtue of their firm faith in Krishna, they're going to get to the level of realizing their identity, which means that we could say 3/4 of the way is done in their devotional service. So Prabhupada says even they can be considered pure devotees. So there isn't, like, you could say, an obvious cutoff somewhere for where somebody is liberated. But certainly anyone who has firm faith and is progressing towards liberation. And so if they stay steadily on that path, they're going to attain it. Certainly from the Madhyam level upward, this is a possibility, a big, good possibility, and from the Uttam level, it's a certainty they're already liberated. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Prabhu. Sorry, that one's a bit technical, but thank you for asking it. Are there any other questions?
Agri, the wonderful class. I want to know how to get. Thank you. You mentioned to get the mercy of the spiritual master. How can we get that?
Yeah. So if we take just very straightforward, what we've been told in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, text 34 is we inquire submissively and we render service to the spiritual master. That is a minimum that we can do. This is what has been advised by Krishna, and this is what all the authorities have done. In addition to that, of course, when we make the inquiries, we hear from the spiritual master, and by hearing with attention and by internalizing what we've heard, so that is contemplating it, applying it, and certainly by praying for mercy and acting according to that, what we've heard from the spiritual master, we can certainly get the mercy of the spiritual master. In addition, of course, the spiritual master gives us instructions, like we've gotten the example here of Sanatana Goswami and the Goswamis, who are given what might seem like challenging instructions, but the spiritual master is giving us the instructions that are with guidance from Krishna himself, coming directly from Krishna himself. So by following the instructions of the spiritual master and doing as he tells us to do very nicely, we can also certainly get his mercy. So it's also an individual thing. Different relationships with spiritual masters may be different. Some devotees may appear to do more, some not so much more, but on the spiritual level, it's all absolute as long as the devotees are doing it with sincerity and with guidance. So, yeah, these are the various ways to get spiritual.
Thank you, Krishnaji. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Is there any other questions, comments? If not, we will go to bhajan for today.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, I just want to see if Raja Shikhar Prabhu is there. Hare Krishna Prabhu, welcome. Are you here?
Hare Krishna
Gone all
Mataji.
quiet. Yeah.
Thank you
Prabhu, is
very
it-
much for the class. Always interesting.
Paramahan Prabhu just wants to test out the pronunciation of your name, I think.
Yeah, Raja Shikhar Prabhu, is there anything, if you're going to share some of what, is there anything that inspired you during class?
Oh, these classes always inspire me from beginning to end. I
All the
really
mercy of
enjoyed
Shri
that.
Guru
Thank
and
you,
Shri
Mataji.
Gauranga.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. So nice hearing you. Bhaktan Kurura Paul Malji, are you there?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisance, all glory to Srila Prabhupada. I am here and I have a question for Mataji. I just put it for her. Thank you very much for wonderful class. Dandava Pranam.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you so much for joining us. Today, Mataji's dogs are not barking. Mataji, is the dogs okay today?
They're also breathing.
Yeah, normally we hear Bhaktan Kurura's Paul dogs barking, but maybe they're listening to a class, Mataji. Okay, thank you. Hare Krishna Maharaj, we hand over back to you.
Hare Krishna. So we're going to sing a bhajan. Okay. Dainya O Prapati. Bengali, very sweet bhajan. In glorification of the Supreme Lord. Hari he doyala mora jaya radhana baro baro e baro nijasa. Hari he doyala mora jaya radhana baro baro e baro nijasa. Bahuyoni Brahminata Loino Sharam Nijaguna Kripa Koro Adhamataram Bahuyoni Brahminata Loino Sharam Nijaguna Kripa Koro Adhamataram Jagata Karana Tumi Jagata Jivan Samachar nahi Radha Raman Jagata Karana Tumi Jagata Jivan Samachar nahi he Radha Raman Bhuvana Mangala Tumi Bhuve
भुवनेर पति तुम्हें उपेखिले नाता की होय बेगति भुवन मंगल तुम्ही भुवनेर पति तुम्हें उपेखिले नाता की होय बेगति भाविया देखिनु जगत मझारे तुम बिन के हो नाही ए दास उधारे भाविया देखिनु जगत मझारे तुम बिन के हो नाही ए दास उधारे हरि हे दयाला मोरा जय राधनाथ पार लय निज साथ हरि हे दयाला मोरा जय राधनाथ पार लय निज साथ बहुजनी ब्राह्मीनाता लय शरण निज गुण कृपा करो आदमातरम बहुजनी ब्राह्मीनाता लय शरण निज गुण कृपा करो आदमातरम जगत करण तुम्ही जगत जीवन समाचार कारण आहे हे राधारमान जगत करण तुम्ही जगत जीवन समाचार कारण आहे हे राधारमान भुवन मंगल तुम्ही भुवनेर पति तुम्हें उपेखिले नाथही होय बेगति भुवन मंगल तुम्ही भुवनेर पति तुम्ही उपेखिले नाथही होय बेगति भाविया देखिनु जगत मझारे तुम बिन के हो नाही हे दास उधारे भाविया देखिनु जगत मझारे तुम बिन के हो नाए दास उधारे हरि हे दयाला मोर जय राधनाथ पार लय निज साथ हरि हे दयाला मोर जय राधनाथ पार लय निज साथ. The translation is, O Hari, O my merciful Lord, all glory is to you. O Lord of Radha, again and again I have pleaded with you, and now I beg you yet again to accept me as your own. O Lord, hopelessly taking birth over and over, I have now come to you for refuge. Please show your merciful nature and deliver this wretched soul. You are the cause of the universe and its very life. Other than you, O lover of Radha, there is no shelter. You bring about auspiciousness for the world, and you are the master of all the worlds as well. O Lord, what will become of me if you forsake me? I have understood after contemplating my predicament that within this world there is no one who can deliver this servant. Shri Shantai, Radharanath, Vijay, Shri Shantai, Bhagavad Jai, Shri Prabhupada, Vijay, Shri Shantai, Govinda. So again, thank you all so much for joining us this evening, for your attention. Tomorrow is very nice spiritual day for Gaudiya Vaishnavism. It's the appearance day of wonderful personalities in Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes. Srimati Vishnupriya Devi appears tomorrow. Srila Raghunath Das Goswami, Srila Raghunath Thakur, and Srila Punjari Nidhi. And it's also the disappearance day of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. This day is known as Vasant Panchami. In the cultural sense, it is the first day of spring in India. And we pray for the mercy of all these wonderful personalities on us to help us to develop the Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So thank you again so much, and please join us next week where we will be discussing the 15th chapter of the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mataji, very much.
Hare Krishna, everybody. Thank you.